love, pain, truth.
The rain was coming down hard, turning the city streets into cold, gray mirrors. Elias pulled his thin coat tighter around his shoulders, trying to keep the wet wind from freezing his bones. It was almost midnight, and he had just finished a double shift at the warehouse. His feet throbbed inside his old work boots, and his back felt like someone had taken a hammer to it. But the physical pain wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the silence in his pocket where his phone should have been buzzing with a ride offer, and the heavy feeling in his chest when he thought about tomorrow. His truck had died that morning. Just sputtered and stopped right in the middle of the intersection. The mechanic had told him it would be $800 to fix the fuel pump. $800. Elias didn't have $800. He barely had 80. He had walked 5 miles in the rain to get to work tonight. And now he had to walk 5 miles back. He kept his head down, watching the puddles, counting his steps to keep his mind off the hunger gnawing at his stomach. He hadn't eaten since a small sandwich at lunch, mostly so he could save the food at home for his daughter. Lily was 7 years old. She was the reason he did this. She was the reason he dragged himself out of bed. Every day, even when he felt like he couldn't move, Elias reached into his pocket and touched the crumpled piece of paper the landlord had shoved under his door 2 days ago. Rent increase. The letter was polite, but the message was clear. Pay the extra $200 a month or get out. It felt like the world was closing in on him from all sides. He missed his wife every single day, but nights like this he missed her strength the most. He didn't know how to do this alone. He turned the corner onto his street. It was a rough neighborhood. The streetlights flickered, and graffiti covered the brick walls. But it was home. Well, it was the place where he and Lily slept. As he got closer to his building, he saw a figure sitting on the bench near the entrance. At first, he thought it was just a pile of bags. Maybe someone waiting for a ride. But as he got closer, he realized it was an old woman. She was hunched over, completely soaked. She wasn't wearing a coat, just a thin cardigan that looked like it had seen better decades. She was shaking violently. Elias stopped. He looked around. The street was empty. It was the kind of neighborhood where people learn to keep their eyes down and keep walking. He knew he should just go inside. He was cold, he was tired, and he had his own problems. He had a daughter to wake up early for school. He couldn't save everyone. He took a step toward the building door, but then he stopped again. He looked at the woman. She looked so small. He thought about Lily. If it were Lily sitting out here in the rain, he would pray someone would stop. "Hey," Elias said. His voice sounded raspy. "Ma'am?" The woman didn't look up. She just pulled her knees closer to her chest, clutching a dirty tote bag to her chest like it contained gold. Elias walked over to her. He could see her teeth chattering. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. The woman slowly turned her head. Her eyes were wide and confused, like she didn't know where she was. She looked at Elias, but she didn't seem to really see him. I don't know," she whispered. Her voice was shaky and thin. "I can't find the house." It was white, with a fence. Elias looked up and down the street. There were no white houses with fences here. Just apartment blocks and concrete. "I think you might be a long way from home, ma'am. You're freezing." He shivered as a gust of wind hit them. He couldn't leave her here. If he did, he knew he would check the window every 10 minutes to see if she was still moving. And if she wasn't, he couldn't have that on his conscience. "Come on," Elias said. He reached out a hand. "I live right upstairs. You can't stay out here. You'll get sick." The woman hesitated. She looked at his rough, calloused hand. She was scared. But then she looked at the rain, and she must have realized she had no other choice. She took his hand. It was ice cold. He helped her stand up. She was unsteady on her feet. He put her arm around his waist and supported most of her weight as they walked up the 3 flights of stairs to his apartment. He was exhausted, but he made sure she didn't slip on the wet steps. When he opened the door, The smell of the apartment greeted him, a mix of old wood and the lavender soap he bought for Lily. It wasn't much, but it was warm. "Dad?" A little voice came from the small bedroom. Elias guided the woman to the sofa and quickly went to the bedroom door. He peeked in. Lily was sitting up in bed, rubbing her eyes. "Go back to sleep, Bug," Elias whispered, forcing a smile. "I'm just home. I have a guest." Lily looked past him and saw the old woman dripping on the couch. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded and lay back down, pulling the covers up. She was used to him bringing people home sometimes. He was a fixer. It was just who he was. Elias went into the small kitchenette. He opened the cabinet. There was a can of chicken noodle soup and a box of crackers. That was supposed to be lunch for tomorrow. He sighed and turned on the stove. He poured the soup into a pan and watched the steam rise. He went to the bathroom and grabbed his biggest, fluffiest towel. It was frayed at the edges, but it was dry. He walked back to the living room where the woman sat, shivering and staring blankly at the turned-off television. "Here," he said, wrapping the towel around her shoulders. "Get dry." She looked up at him, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "I'm a stranger." Elias shrugged. "My wife used to say that everyone is just fighting a hard battle. Sometimes you just need a dry towel." He went back to the kitchen and stirred the soup. When it was hot, he poured it into a mug. He didn't have a clean bowl, so the mug would have to do. He brought it to her, along with the sleeve of crackers. "Drink this," he said. "It'll warm you up." Her hands were shaking so much she could barely hold the mug. Elias put his hands over hers to steady it. "Slowly. Take your time." She took a sip. The warmth seemed to bring a little color back to her pale face. She ate a few crackers. For the first time, her eyes focused. She looked around the small room. She saw the peeling paint on the walls, the second-hand furniture, and the pile of bills on the small kitchen table. She saw the drawing Lily had made for him taped to the fridge, a picture of a superhero with a crown. "You're a father," she said softly. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Elias said. "Just her and me." "She's lucky," the woman said. "You work hard. I can see it in your hands." Elias looked at his own hands. They were scarred and greasy. "I do what I can." When she finished the soup, her eyes started to droop. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving only exhaustion. Elias stood up. He only had one bed. He and Lily shared it sometimes, but she was asleep now, and he didn't want to wake her or scare this guest. He took the pillow from his armchair and an extra blanket from the closet. He threw them down on the floor next to the sofa. "You take the couch," he said. "It pulls out." "I'll sleep here." The woman looked down at him, then at the couch. "No," she said. "You've been working. You take the bed. The girl can have me." "It's okay," Elias insisted. "I prefer the floor. My back likes it." It was a lie, but he said it with a smile. He helped the woman lie down on the couch and covered her with the quilt his mother had made years ago. She looked tiny under it. "Thank you," she whispered, closing her eyes. "I was so scared." "Don't worry about it now," Elias said. "Just sleep." He turned off the lamp, leaving only the glow of the streetlights coming through the window. He lay down on the hard floor, pulling the scratchy blanket up to his chin. The floor was cold, and his hip ached, but he listened to the rain outside and the steady breathing of the woman on the couch. For the first time all day, the knot in his chest loosened just a little. He didn't know how he was going to pay for the truck or the rent. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for tonight, he had kept his daughter safe, and he had helped someone survive the storm. That had to be enough. The next morning, Elias woke up with a stiff neck. The floor was unforgiving, but he didn't complain. He sat up and rubbed his eyes, the silence of the apartment telling him Lily was still asleep. He looked over at the couch. The woman was sitting up, staring at the wall with a look of pure terror in her eyes. For a second, she didn't know where she was. "Good morning," Elias said softly, keeping his voice low so he wouldn't startle her. She jumped a little, then turned to look at him. Slowly, the fear faded, replaced by confusion. I thought I was in my garden, she whispered. The roses were blooming. Elias stood up and folded his blanket. It's okay. You're safe here. I'm Elias. You stayed here last night because of the rain. The woman nodded slowly, touching her gray hair. Martha, she said, as if reminding herself. I am Martha. Over the next few days, Martha became a quiet part of their small routine. Elias didn't have much, but what he had, he shared. He gave her his old robe to wear since her clothes were still drying. He made oatmeal for breakfast, giving her the larger portion and keeping just a little for himself. He didn't have the heart to tell her that his bank account was almost empty. He just kept moving, fueled by coffee and determination. It wasn't easy. Martha was confused a lot of the time. Sometimes she would try to open the front door in the middle of the night, saying she heard her husband calling her. Elias would gently guide her back to the couch, tucking the blanket around her shoulders and talking to her until she calmed down. It was like taking care of a child, but Elias was patient. He saw how lonely she was, how lost she felt in her own mind. It reminded him of how his mother felt before she passed away. Lily took to Martha immediately. On the second day, Lily brought her box of crayons and sat at the small coffee table with her. You can color with me, Lily said, sliding a piece of paper toward the old woman. Martha's shaky hand picked up a blue crayon. She didn't draw a picture. Instead, she started making long, wavy lines like ocean waves. It's peaceful, she murmured. Elias watched them from the kitchenette where he was washing dishes by hand. He smiled, but the smile was tired. He had spent the morning on the phone with local shelters and hospitals. None of them had room for her, or they said they couldn't take her without proper identification. Martha's bag had been soaked in the rain and her wallet was empty of ID, just a few soggy receipts. It felt like they were stuck in a loop. In the evenings, after Lily went to bed, Elias would sit at the table with a notepad and a pencil. Drawing was something he used to love, before the bills and the grief buried everything. He would sketch ideas for furniture, chairs that rocked perfectly, tables with hidden compartments. It was a way to dream without spending money. One night, Martha shuffled over to the table. She sat down across from him, watching the pencil move across the paper. You have a gift, she said suddenly. Her voice was stronger than it had been in days. Elias looked up, surprised. It's just doodling. Helps me think. It's not just doodling, she insisted, tapping the paper with a finger. You see things. The structure. The beauty. My husband. He built things too. He knew that a good line speaks louder than 1,000 words. Elias looked at the sketch of a simple wooden chair. It was just lines on a page. But looking at it through her eyes, he felt a spark of pride. I used to want to be a designer, he admitted quietly. But life got in the way. Martha reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. Don't let life steal your eyes, Elias. The world needs builders. The next day, things changed. It was a Friday, and the sun was actually out for a change. Elias was getting ready for his shift at the warehouse. He hated leaving Martha alone, but he couldn't afford to miss work. He left her a sandwich and strict instructions, not to open the door for anyone. He had only been gone for an hour when he got a call on his phone. It was a neighbor, Mrs. Gable from down the hall. Elias, there are some fancy-looking people knocking on your door, she said. Suits and ties. In this building? It looks suspicious. Elias's heart stopped. He feared the landlord had come with eviction papers early. Or maybe the police. I'm on my way. He ran 3 blocks in the heat, sweat pouring down his back. When he burst into the hallway, he saw them. A tall man in a sharp gray suit and a woman who looked like a social worker. They were standing by his door, looking uncomfortable and out of place. Can I help you? Elias gasped, out of breath. The tall man turned around. He looked anxious. Yes, we are looking for a woman. An elderly woman. We believe she might have come this way. We tracked her phone signal to this area before it died. Elias relaxed a little. Who are you looking for? Her name is Martha, the man said, his voice cracking just a little. She is my mother. She wandered away from her home 3 days ago. Elias stared at him. Mother? This man in the expensive suit, who probably made in a day what Elias made in a year, was looking for the confused woman sleeping on his couch. She's here, Elias said simply. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. Martha was sitting on the couch, staring at the door. When she saw the man, her face lit up. Robert? She asked. The man rushed past Elias and fell to his knees beside the couch. Mom, oh Mom, we've been so worried. He hugged her tight. And for a second, Martha looked confused again. But then she patted his back, recognizing him. Elias stood in the doorway, feeling like an intruder in his own home. He watched the reunion. The social worker checked Martha's vitals, talking softly into a radio. The man, Robert, stood up and turned to Elias. He looked different now. The anxiety was gone, replaced by overwhelming relief. He looked around the small apartment, taking in the peeling paint, the secondhand furniture, and the drawings on the table. I don't know how to thank you, Robert said, walking over to him. He reached into his jacket pocket. Please take this. For your trouble. For the food. He held out a thick wad of cash. It looked like more money than Elias had ever held. Elias looked at the money, then at the man. He knew he could take it. He could pay the rent. He could fix the truck. He could buy Lily a new coat. But he looked at Martha, who was watching him with those clear, knowing eyes. If he took the money, this became a transaction. It wasn't kindness anymore. It was business. Elias gently pushed the hand away. Keep your money, he said. Your mother is safe. That's all that matters. Robert looked stunned. But you took her in. You cared for her. Most people wouldn't have. She needed help, Elias said with a shrug. I was there. They helped Martha to the door. She paused next to Elias. She looked at the sketches on the table one last time. Then she looked at him. Remember what I said, Elias, she whispered, squeezing his arm. The scales balance. And then they were gone. The social worker and the son and the old woman, vanishing down the stairs and out into the world of black cars and big houses. Elias closed the door. The apartment was silent again. He stood there for a long time, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The adrenaline of the morning faded, leaving him feeling empty and incredibly tired. He walked to the table and looked at his sketch of the chair. It was still there. He sat down and put his head in his hands. It was good that she was home. It was the right thing. But now the apartment felt bigger and colder. The bills were still on the counter, exactly where he left them. The rent was still due. The truck was still broken. The kindness was done. The guest was gone. And Elias was right back where he started. Alone and struggling. 3 days had passed since Martha left, and the apartment felt incredibly quiet. The rainy weather had cleared up, leaving the city gray and dry, matching the inside of Elias's chest. He sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the eviction notice that had been sitting there for a week. Today was the deadline. If he didn't come up with the extra money and the late fees by 5 o'clock, the landlord was going to start the process to throw them out. Elias looked at his phone. No calls, no texts. Just a black screen. He had spent the last 3 days calling every mechanic in town, begging for a payment plan or a trade, but no one was interested. His truck was still dead, parked on the street like a metal coffin. Lily was sitting on the rug, playing with her dolls. She was laughing, making up voices for the characters, completely unaware that her world was about to be turned upside down. That innocence broke Elias's heart more than the bills did. He stood up and walked over to the closet, pulling out a large duffel bag from the top shelf. Bug, he said softly. Can you pause your game for a second? Lily looked up, her smile fading when she saw the bag. Are we going on a trip, Dad? Elias sat down on the floor next to her. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. Yeah, kind of. Remember Aunt Teresa? She lives out in the country. We might need to go stay with her for a little while. Why? Lily asked, tilting her head. I like my school. I like my room. Elias reached out and smoothed her hair. I know, baby. I do too. But sometimes grown-ups have problems with money that are too big to fix right away. We need a safe place to land while I fix this. Lily looked at the bag, then back at him. She was a smart kid. She knew things were tight. She knew he skipped dinner so she could eat. She didn't cry though. She just nodded and went back to her doll. Okay, as long as we go together. Elias felt a lump in his throat. He stood up and started throwing clothes into the bag: shirts, pants, a few favorite toys. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Tick-tock, tick-tock. It felt like a countdown. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the loud, aggressive bang of the landlord. It was a firm, polite knock. Elias froze. He looked at the clock. It wasn't 5 o'clock yet. He walked to the door slowly, wiping his hands on his jeans. He looked through the peephole. His eyes widened. Standing in the hallway were the same two people from the other day. The tall man in the suit, Robert, and another man, older this time, carrying a leather briefcase. Elias opened the door, keeping the chain on. What do you want? I told you, I don't want money. Robert held up his hands, palms open. I know, Elias. I know. We aren't here to give you cash. My mother, she gave us strict instructions. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't sleep until we promised to come back here and speak to you properly. Elias hesitated, then unlatched the chain and opened the door. The smell of the hallway drifted in. Robert stepped inside, followed by the older man. They looked around the small apartment again. The duffel bag packed by the door didn't go unnoticed. We aren't too late, are we? Robert asked, gesturing to the bag. We were just leaving, Elias said, his voice hard. Please, Robert said. Just give us 5 minutes. My mother, Martha, she suffers from confusion, yes. But since she came home, she has been clearer than she has been in years. She told us about the sketches. She told us about how you take care of your daughter. She told us about your wife. The older man with the briefcase stepped forward. He had a kind face and sharp eyes. Mr. Elias, I run the family foundation. But more importantly, I run the design firm that Martha's late husband built. It's a furniture and architecture company. He opened his briefcase and took out a folder, but instead of money, he pulled out a sheet of paper. It looked like a contract. My husband always said that you can't teach heart, the man continued, paraphrasing Martha. He said you have to find it in people. My mother believes you have that heart. He laid the paper on the kitchen table, right on top of the eviction notice. This is a proposal. We have an apprenticeship program that we shut down years ago because we couldn't find the right people. Martha wants us to reopen it. For you. Elias looked at the paper. It was blurry. I don't understand. It's a job, Robert said. A full apprenticeship. It includes a salary that is 3 times what you make at the warehouse. It includes full benefits, health insurance for you and Lily, and a retirement plan. And because the workshop is across town, the company provides a vehicle for work use. Elias stared at them. He felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Is this a joke? No joke, Robert said. He pulled another paper from the folder. And there is this. This is a check for the back rent and the repairs for your truck. And this, he pointed to a document with the school's crest on it, is a trust fund set up for Lily's education. It covers private school, college, everything. It's what my mother wanted. Elias looked at the papers. The numbers didn't seem real. They were big enough to wipe out his debts in a single signature. Why? Was all he could say. Why would you do all this for a stranger? Robert smiled, a genuine smile this time. Because when my mother was lost and scared, you didn't see a crazy old lady. You saw a human being who needed help. You gave her your bed, Elias. You gave her your last food. In this world, that is the rarest currency there is. Wealth isn't just money, my friend. Sometimes it's having a conscience. My mother just wanted to balance the scales. The older man held out a pen. You don't have to decide right now on the job. But please take the help for the rent. Stay in your home. Let Lily finish her school year. Talk to your daughter. Elias looked over at the rug. Lily had stopped playing. She was watching the men, her eyes wide. He looked at the eviction notice, the source of his stress for weeks. Then he looked at the contract. It wasn't charity. It was a chance. It was someone seeing value in him that he had forgotten was there. It was respect. Elias took the pen. His hand was shaking, just like Martha's had been that rainy night. He signed the paper. Thank you, Elias whispered. Tell her thank you. She knows, Robert said. She said you would understand. The men gathered their things and left, shaking Elias's hand one last time before disappearing down the hall. The door clicked shut. Elias stood in the silence for a moment. He looked at the duffel bag on the floor. He kicked it into the closet. He didn't need it anymore. He walked over to the table and picked up the sketch of the wooden chair he had drawn the night Martha left. For the first time in years, he didn't see a doodle. He saw a future. He saw himself building something real. Dad? Lily's small voice came from behind him. Are we going to Aunt Teresa's? Elias turned around, tears stinging his eyes, but for the first time they weren't tears of sadness. He picked Lily up and spun her around. No, Bug, he laughed. We aren't going anywhere. We're staying right here. Everything is going to be okay. The sun finally broke through the dirty window, lighting up the small apartment. It wasn't a mansion, and the walls were still peeling, but it felt like the richest place on earth. Elias held his daughter close, knowing that the storm had finally passed, and the sun was here to stay.